Welcome to the Morning Drugs Podcast. I'm your host, Gavin, and today I am joined by my co-host, Shannon, the OCPD Coach. It's good to talk to you again. You had messaged me and said, well, actually, I reached out to you, to be fair, and I said, is there a topic you wanted to discuss this week? And I know we had really danced around the edges of this topic the last time we spoke. You had said that religion would be a good topic for today. So the idea behind the Morning Drugs podcast is that we will focus on mental health, but really in a broad way that encompasses a lot of different cultural, socio-ecological, political, scientific, whatever it is, aspects and things that are out there that are beyond our control that do have large impacts on our mental health. So again, you wanted to talk about religion, and I don't know where you want to start, but I am going to let you start, and we'll go from there.
Great. So I'm thinking about the best place to start with religion. That's a very powerful and very duty-filled topic to talk about. I don't take it lightly. So what I will say is this: mentioned it last time we spoke. I grew up personally in a very religious home and family. My great grandfather, he was a pastor my entire life. He's still alive. He's nice and 90 years old. He's lived a blessed life. My grandmother was very active in church, still is. My uncle served very, very active in church and always kept me in church as well. And even my mom, she's been active in church as well. So I grew up rooted to Christianity and even went to a Lutheran school from second through eighth grade. I know we talk a lot about, and jump in whenever you want, but I know we talk a lot about how we feel confined to obeying rules. We have the sense of duty to obey rules and do the right thing. And I do
Mm-hmm.
personally think a lot of that can be traced back to our religious upbringing, the Ten Commandments, the law and order of the Bible. I remember vividly as a kid hearing about Sodom and Gomorrah. And that story, even to this day, is still something that anytime I think about certain sins that are just egregious, if you were to say, I just always
Mm-hmm.
think about these severe punishments that were in the Bible. So I'm not really sure where to jump with it. I do want to talk, but I want it to be more organically the conversation as we flow through.
Sure. Yeah, I've got some questions for you to kind of jump in, I guess, kickstart the topic. There's a lot of directions, like you said, we can go in. The first thing that I'd like to talk about, I guess, as kind of a gateway into the topic, as relates OCPD. You mentioned Lutheran. Were there other Christian denominations that you belonged to, or was it Lutheran?
So Baptist is the
Baptist.
other one. Yep.
You are Baptist currently?
Currently, I'm just Christian. I don't really conform to a certain one. I go to Elevation, which is well, I think it's non-denominational. So
Okay, perfect, perfect. So I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm sure throughout this conversation we'll dig in to what exactly that means. But when I came across OCPD, and for the audience, that's obsessive compulsive personality disorder, when I first became aware of it, I read an article. It was probably like a 4 or 5 page article. And it was essentially like reading my biography. I was still involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses at that time, not in a deep, meaningful way, but I definitely was still associated with that religion. And I remember reading this article, and this was when I first started seeking out a potential diagnosis and trying to find the right therapist. This is like, I think either late 20s, early 30s, right around that time period. And I'm reading this article, and it talks about OCPD people being, on the whole, pretty religious. If I'm remembering the article correctly, it was basically this idea that when you're young, you are implanted, if you happen to be raised religious, you're kind of implanted with these religious beliefs. And because of the OCPD, it really becomes difficult to consider that there's any other option, not only whether there's a God or there isn't a God, but even if other religions are worth looking into, is it worth entertaining the idea that maybe I don't belong to the correct religion if you subscribe to the idea that there is, one true religion, one true God. And it really shook me because I felt very confident that my faith was based on my faith. that I had made a conscious decision to read the Bible and learn the lessons and then choose to believe that this book was a book that was inspired and authored by God.
Mhm.
And I didn't quite know what to do when I read that article about OCPD. It really affected me deeply. That was the aside from the fact that I was like, oh, I might have a personality disorder. That's like a whole other thing. That was something new to deal with. But the religious component was really, really tough for me. And I struggled with that a long time. And in fact, I still struggle with this quite a bit to this day. And we'll get into that as we go on. I'm curious if you ever came across any information like that during the kind of early days of you discovering OCPD, or if you've come across that at all, and does that resonate with you?
So I'm a little bit newer to the OCPD train, I guess you could call it. The whole
Sure.
experience of having OCPD is something I've dealt with, but I wasn't aware of the disorder until last year. Now, as for the religious side of it, I actually think this is something that when I was in high school, it was very, very conflicting for me. But when I was in high school, my stepfather went away, and he went away to prison, and he came back converted to Muslim. So
Oh,
he
wow.
he was reading the Quran. He was never religious. He never was really a religious person, my father either, but he was religious, and I remember he gave me books, he gave me different readings, and I was really getting into it to the point where I actually claimed Islam to be my religion. Now I wasn't super into it like I probably should have been, but I did actually for years. I think probably a good 3 or 4 years, most of my high school, that's what I identified as. I never neglected Christ. I never said that God wasn't real. I always knew that God existed. It was just something I've known or felt, I guess you could say, the faith. But when I was in high school, I did actually give another religion a chance. And when I gave that religion a chance, it was very insightful. It was more, I was learning about myself. So he was a black, a Moor, is what you call it. So it's Islam, but it's less about the faith part and more about your higher self, knowing about yourself. So it's more
Hmm.
self centered, if you were to speak. I remember I felt really empowered by it, and it really felt empowering, but I didn't have the same sustenance that I have now with the religion that I have. And I just want to speak on this real quick. I wanted to say something. A lot of times I talk to young folks, and many of them, they have a relationship where they go to church, they listen to the music, they might fall asleep or text while the sermon is going on. And I have to always remind them that that was me up until last year. I was not the type of person that would actually be in church and be engaged in church, which is even weirder because my wife's father was my childhood pastor. So my
Yeah.
whole life I've been in church. It's just when I grew up, I wasn't really into it. And it wasn't until I had, I think, 2 or 3 different experiences that really strengthened my faith, where now my faith is there. And I've gotten to the point in my head where even if I lose everything, I think my faith will still be strong because my life is less about me now. And that's where I had to get to, but it took me until I was 29. I wanted to just answer your question and not pivot too far before we move forward.
I guess to provide context to our conversation, I basically don't know where I stand in terms of faith and belief in a higher power. It unfortunately is a big deal to me. I think for some people, not knowing it's just not an important part of who they are. It isn't a strong part of their identity. And for me, because of going through infancy up into my early 30s, religion and a belief in a higher power was a integral part of who I am. And I was actually speaking with my therapist this week, and I had this visual as I was talking to him. And we're talking about kind of religion and politics. I'll keep it political for a second and then transition over into how I lay the religion on top of it. But I was talking about people that are either on the right politically or on the left politically. And at some point during their lives, they kind of change sides. You're familiar with like the term like red pill or blue pill?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So for somebody on the right, they become blue pilled, they switch over and vice versa, right? And when you're being red or blue pilled, you're being given a lot of information that conflicts with your worldview. And over time, you start believing this new information. And this isn't a critique of whether this is true or false information. I'm just saying the individual starts to believe this new information. But the transformation to the other side is not complete until you find a community. And the same, I think, could be said, or at least for me, it applies to belief in God and religion. And so the visual that I had was you're on a ship and it sinks, and you manage to get a hold of a lifesaver. And you're holding on to that lifesaver, you're gripping it, right? You're white knuckling this thing. It's the only thing keeping you alive in the ocean. And you're never going to let go of this lifesaver until a raft comes along, a much larger, a full raft, and it's full of people, and they come over to you and they grab your hand and they pull you inside. And of course, at that moment, you're going to let go of the lifesaver. The raft is a much better, this is a life-saving device. It's a much bigger, and now you're with a group of people and you're finally ready to let go of the lifesaver and to get into the raft. And part of that, I think, has to do with finding your tribe where you feel like you fit in, and also not being willing to let go of your beliefs, because holding on to those beliefs allows you to be part of a group. And so for me, I feel like when this happened in my early 30s, it was like I let go of the lifesaver, but there was no lifeboat. And I'm just out there bobbing up and down in the ocean, treading water, trying to keep myself alive. And I feel very, very displaced. And some of that has to do with the OCPD. That article I read, it did affect me quite a bit, but I also was already kind of on the fringes of the religion. And for me, I tend to think a little bit more, I guess, what I would refer to as scientifically. And I started struggling with the idea of there being a God. And then if you're struggling with the concept of God, then religion doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this point. But unfortunately, because of that 30 years spent believing in God and believing in one specific religion and thinking to myself that was the true religion, it is, I think, very, very, very impactful on one's mental health. And I bring this up not just because it's the topic, but you and I are hoping to have these conversations because we imagine that there may be maybe people out there listening that share similar circumstances. And part of building this community is finding things in common. So for me, I find religion to be an endlessly fascinating topic, and the idea of a higher power endlessly fascinating, because honestly, I spend a lot of time thinking about it and not really getting anywhere. For you, do you have, or do you experience, I guess, moments of doubt at times? And if you do you feel like they're connected to OCPD on any level? Or do you think, I guess the first, you need to answer the first question before you can answer the second. But so do you experience doubt from time to time? Or do you feel like you're at a point in your life now where you really have a solid faith?
I will say this. I am the type of person, I have no idea if this is related to my OCPD, but I need to understand how everything works. It's like a burning desire for me. I hate not having knowledge about something. It even gets to the point where if I watch a movie and I see an actor or actress and they look familiar, I will obsess about what movie I saw that person from until I figure it out, and then I can relax. So to say that I don't have doubt without that closure will be a lie, because I do have a lot of moments where I think, okay, you can think science and people can make their conclusion there. You could think spiritual and you think God, and people can make their conclusions here. But something had to come first. Either way you slice it, something had to come first. What was the first thing that existed? And what is existence? And then that's when I get down the rabbit hole. And I've done this so many times that I've just decided I'm not suffering in life not knowing that. I just try to do what I think makes the most sense for my life. I hope that answered that question. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you were talking about with the tribe, though, because I thought that was really fascinating. Before I got with my wife, I was in college and I was working in the corporate world for about, I want to say 6 years. That entire window from me leaving high school to getting with my wife, and the fact that my wife's father was my childhood pastor. Well, we dated when I was younger, so I stopped going to church, and I always thought it would be really weird for me to go to church where my ex girlfriend was, and it just was uncomfortable for me. So I didn't
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
So that was something where I isolated myself in a weird way. I isolated myself. I didn't have a tribe because I didn't have. I was going to school, high school, and work. Well, school, nobody was talking about church. Everybody was talking about school and other stuff. And then when I started working, you don't really talk about religion in work. So at what point would I have had a tribe that I would have been able to connect to when I lost my childhood church and didn't have anybody else that I knew? That was my island that I was on for so long. And when I was in that island, my life, no matter what I achieved, it felt so meaningless. I've always been a high achiever, but no matter what mountain I climb in my professional, I'm doing cool stuff, man. I'm working with Marvel for Infinity War when that movie's coming out, and working with the NCAA and doing different things with the Detroit Lions because I'm from Detroit, and I just still could not have that feeling of being content in life. I always needed more. I always wanted more. So fast forward, I'm with my wife now. We decided to move from Michigan to Florida. This is about we're dating again for probably about 4 months, and I was like, yeah, I gotta go. It's time for me to go. We moved out here. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have a church home. Then COVID hit probably 3 months after we moved out here, and when COVID hit, we were even more isolated because you couldn't go out the house. It was a lockdown. It was really crazy how that was. So I'm going all of this time without physical interaction in a physical workplace. I mean, a physical place that I would call my tribe. My wife one day, and this is sometime last year, she joins this e group. It's called an e group, and it was a group of folks for married couples who met online, and we met once a week. So we joined the e group, and then I realized another thing. When I grew up in church, there was nobody my age. Everybody was old compared to me. They were 70, 80 years old, and it was kind of depressing for me. It was sad. It's like, oh, this is I don't feel connected here. I don't,
Yeah,
you know.
I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the feeling. So I never felt. I never thought I was in a place I needed to be. It seemed like I was not going to get it until I got older. And when my wife joined this e group, I'm in a group now with 4 or 5 other young married couples. When I say young, I'm saying we're no more than 6 years apart either side. I saw a married couple. I saw other men who looked like me, other young black men who had their children with them and the home and were trying to be active fathers. Even some who had been married for years and weren't fathers. But I felt that community because I'm like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. I didn't want to be a thug. I didn't want to be in a gang. I didn't want to be in jail. I didn't want to be dead. I did what I could at work. There were just so many factors. But when I joined that group, it changed me because I got to see that there were people who actually were strong in their convictions and in their faith. And it made me look at it where, like, okay, well, I can tell when people are faking. Like, I think I have a pretty good eye for discernment, a pretty good discernment ability,
Hmm.
and I could tell that they were authentic with what they were doing. And even to this day, I'm still connected to them all. About 3 months into the group, they want to do a meetup in person at the church because we have a physical location. And we do that meetup, and all of the guys in the team are actually serving. I mean, in our e group, are actually serving in the church in different capacities. With them serving in different capacities, it made me want to join and serve as well. And I joined the same team. Now I'm even more involved. Now I'm the pastors. I'm all of the pastors. We have multiple pastors in our campus. We're having conversations. They know my wife. They're actually praying for me. They're interested in what's going on. Now I'm mentoring other folks in the church who we've got teenagers who need some guidance. They need somebody to look up to, and there are a lot of different elderly people. So then over time it started being less about what I could get out of the church And it was more about, okay, now you are a leader in this community and you have to be an example for everybody who's looking at you, but you also have to be authentic in your faith. One of my stories is this. This is a real short one. So, coaching, my wife and I, we wanted to go to Detroit to visit family because they were not able to make it out to see us. Yet, I'm very financially responsible, I would say. I try to not make bad investments and try to make money moves at the right time. And I'll try to stay away from debt. So even though I had debt, I didn't want to use it. We wanted to go see our family. And I talked to our family and I said, hey, you all were coming out here instead of us coming. I mean, instead of you coming out here, you just send us the money and we'll come there. We'll drive and we can use for gas and clothes because Michigan and Florida are two different types of weather. I got promised. It was the weirdest thing. My father-in-law, he promised that he was going to give us $2,000. He just said that's just what he was going to do. He was going to sow a seed. So it was funny. He didn't come through. And this is like days before we're about to leave the road. And he didn't come through. He didn't message me about it or anything. It just was as if he never said it. So I'm just talking to my wife. I'm like, man, I don't know what we're going to do. We might not be able to go because I don't want to go thousands of dollars in debt just to go see family right now. I don't think that's smart. And I was at work and I got a random notification, man. This was recently. I got
Yeah.
a random notification from a lady I never met in my life. And she messaged me and asked if we could meet. So she works at the same company I work at. I'm like, yeah, of course. I love talking to people. We hop on a Zoom call. And she found me through my company because she works there. We have an internal database. She just started telling me, she said, I don't know what it was about you, but I saw your profile and it was just something, just kept saying, talk to him, talk to him. I'm like, all right, cool. We talk. Apparently, she has a son who's interested in game development. And I offered coaching because it was just like, okay, well, I can help him out. And I offered the coaching. And this, mind you, this is 3 days before we're about to hit the road.
Hmm.
So the next, I send her the contract. I talk to him and everything. And I send her my price. And I send her a price of $2,000. And this is the night before we're going to go. Now, I'm fully not expecting her to pay it because a lot of times people
Right.
have to do payment plans. Well, the morning that we're supposed to go leave to hit the road, because I just decided, God, I'm going to have faith. I'm going to just do it. That
Right.
morning, I
Right.
wake up 5 a.m., the full $2,000 paid in full in my account. And that might not seem like a big deal to anybody, but when you understand everything that led up to that and the divine timing of it, it was so powerful that doesn't just happen. I've never had that happen again
Right.
since then. It's just being obedient. Just okay, you say go, go. I'm gonna give you another one real quick. Now, this one is a little more emotional. This is the one that was really emotional for me. Well, I went to North Carolina because our church we do a youth camp every year, and this is my first time going. And I served as a leader. I had about 4 guys that I was responsible for, and by the time the trip ended after a week, I was responsible for 12 guys because all the guys was just they were gravitating and I was connecting with all of them in a genuine way. So one of the young men, I never interacted with him before, but it was something. This is why when I say, it was God speaking to me, it's because it's a force that you can't explain and it doesn't make sense. And that's when
Hmm.
I know to me, a lot of times, that's why I say it's God talking to me, telling me to do something. And I went up to
Right.
this young man, I said, man, I don't really know you. I haven't really had a conversation with you, but for some reason, it seemed like God is telling me that, you should get baptized today. And I said, like I said, I don't know anything about you. And it was the weirdest thing, man. He just started pouring his life story out to me right there and telling me how he's been on the fence about getting baptized for the longest because he had a really traumatic experience in his life that almost left him dead. It was a brain injury, serious brain injury a couple years ago. Man, I pulled every string in the book. I had all of. They didn't want to baptize him right on the spot because they wanted to wait until Sunday, and I was able to get him to get baptized with like 400 other young people, teenagers, and his mom was there, dude. His mom was another leader who I knew his mom. She told me she had a son. I didn't know that was her son, and she told me while we were there, they were hugging and crying. And I got it all on video how long she had been praying for her son to turn his life over to God because he's the one who got her. And
Right.
it was the most powerful. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. And it was so much many other things. Just that same camp, there was a young man who this is one of the 12 that I wound up taking on, but this is before I took him on. He wound up coming out with he had an issue with a security guard. And I wasn't aware of this, but he was sitting behind me. So he comes back from the bathroom and he's going like languages, foul, just all types of crazy stuff. He winds up sitting down behind me and he's just going off. And I tell him, like, we got to step outside because you're doing way too much in this vicinity right now. So we might have to take it outside. Because, the young guys, they all try to be super tough for some reason. That's just the default.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wound up taking him outside and just talking to him. Me and my pastor, he asked me if I could take him on as one of my guys because he needed somebody to actually connect with him, man. He just told me that the week before he came, he just lost his cousin just got shot. He just lost his step pops too. He had a twin brother there too, man. They twins. They both going through this, and they the whole time, and they just quiet, but you could tell that they had a lot of anger in them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking to the young man. I tell him like, man, just give me a hug, like give me an actual hug with two arms. And he gave me a hug, man. He just was crying, like how I'm crying now, but it was just heavy, like he hadn't had the chance to let that out the whole time. And I wound up taking him on as one of my guys, and I took care of him. I looked out for him, messaged them, made sure they had everything they needed, got him acclimated, and we wound up in one of the services. I think it's the next day or 2 days later, and I just was praying, like, God, just move in this room, fill this room, fill this room. I've never prayed that before, and I don't know why I prayed it, but it was the weirdest thing. It's like something actually hit me, not physically. I'm not over
Mm-hmm.
exaggerating, but it's like
Yeah.
something hit me and I could not stop crying. And I don't know what it was. It wasn't crying because I was sad. And I tried to explain to my wife and my mother right afterwards, and I couldn't. I said, it's like, imagine you had the happiest thing that ever happened, the best moment in your life that ever happened, times 20, but you can't explain why it's so important to you, why it's so valuable to you. Man, I'm sitting next to him and I'm tearing up. I'm going through it. And the young man who was going through all this, they thought he was such a bad kid. They had called a level 10 security threat. They said they were going to have to call some serious folks because he said he was going to do some dangerous stuff. And I'm
Yeah,
talking to
yeah.
the young man, and now this young man he's patting me on my back, hugging me, talking about he's just grateful that I gave him a chance and didn't count him out, and actually communicated with him and talked with him. So all these experiences happen, man, and I get back home from North Carolina and I'm recording myself just talking about the experience. I wanted to do a retro, and man, 45 minutes I just couldn't control myself. And like I said, I've never been hit like that in my life. It was the most positive experience, but it put my life in so much. It gave me so much perspective, and I stopped looking at my life to be mine and started looking at
Mm-hmm.
what I could do to help others and connect other people. And for me, that's what my church has been about. It has been that tribe, building the tribe, looking out for the people who need to be looked out for. There's an older handicapped lady who she holds the door open, she serves, and I never talked to her. One day I'm like, let me talk to you because 15, 20 people walk by and did the same thing. And now it's my sense of duty, as the OCPD says. If somebody needs to do it, it might need to be me. And I'm just talking to her, man, and she telling me her story. She just lost a brother a few weeks back, and I got pulled away from the conversation. Then I came back and finished the conversation, and she said, "Thanks for coming back because a lot of people don't actually come back to finish conversations." Little stuff like that, man. My wife last week took her to a Christmas party at the church, and the mothers there got to share with her how their young teenagers have been able to have somebody they can connect with that's not just faking it or just telling them what to do just for an ulterior motive, but actually have real conversations. Giving. I don't want to talk about how much I give, but I do a lot of giving. If it's money, if it's time, whatever it is. And that's another one of my things with OCPD that I never would have been able to do. I used to be really tight with my money. I didn't really like to spend it at all.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Um, man, it gets real for me. It's real. It's real.
I think you've illustrated or helped to illustrate. Well, one, religion is a tough topic, in part just because of the amount of different directions you can take it, and the amount of different belief systems and non-belief systems, I guess, that are out there. And then I'm thinking too, as you're talking, this is I don't know what episode this is going to be because I'm still recording episodes right now. None of this has come out, but this will be one of the earlier episodes. So the point I'm getting at is I'm thinking this is so challenging to do this podcast because not only am I being taken in many, many different directions. And I'm thinking, well, I can jump in and say this and say that. But the whole entire point of this, right, is to have a conversation and for me to just sit here and listen. And then when it's my turn to speak, I'll come in and say something. But my brain has kind of gone off in 1,000 different directions while you were talking. And then there's always, like, at the back of my mind, right, is wanting to keep a certain flow and to keep it interesting and to say things that have, some value to them. So I had a lot of things kind of, during that time you were speaking go through my head. But I guess I'll start with kind of how you finished up and the significance or what that means to me, which is that if you are somebody that is spiritual and you are somebody that is living a spiritual existence, you're going to be, I think, more in tune to the things that are happening around you. And you may be experiencing the significance of them or becoming aware of the significance of them, or you may be assigning significance to them. The thing that sticks out for me is, I guess I don't have a belief system. It's not that I don't know what my belief system is, although I don't have a belief system. I am very pro, I'll put a caveat, most religions. I'm definitely, my base level, I'm very pro Christian religions. It's popular now. I think there's some political motivations to this. I think there's other motivations that maybe I'm not fully aware of. And I've looked into this and I continue to research it. But it seems like it's cool to bash on Christians. Is the one religion where people seem to have no problem saying exactly what they think about the teachings or the people that ascribe to those teachings. I think that throughout all of human history, that religion, and I'm specifically, I guess, speaking of Christianity, has been an overwhelming net positive. I don't think that we have cooperative societies without religion. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he wrote The Happiness Hypothesis, and I think the other one is The Righteous Mind. But he really delves into the significance of building societies, and the glue that held everybody together throughout history was religion. And to kind of go from the macro to the micro, or to bring it to what we're talking about, I think that we kicked off by talking about tribe and community. And I can't imagine that there's a better reason to join a group of people than having a shared faith. And below that, or the next level of that would be to have, I think you mentioned the 10 Commandments at some point, or maybe that was when we were
Mm-hmm.
chatting before we hit record. But to share those morals, to share those beliefs is going to be, I think, the most concrete foundation you can build for a community. There's communities online for everything, right? Like you're big into gaming. There's thousands and thousands of different gaming communities, depending on what types of games you like and whether you like to play co-op or independent. See, I'm not a gamer. I can't think of
No,
the
you
words, but
right. Yeah,
whether
indie games.
whether you're playing, like, solo missions, or whether you're playing with other
Mm-hmm.
people, or whether you're playing fighting games, or you're playing building games like Minecraft, or you're doing what's that farming one that people play on their phones,
Yeah,
like
farmers.
Farmville, or something
Yeah,
like that, right? There's thousands of reasons, and probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands, definitely hundreds of thousands of different communities. And that's all fine and good. There's, of course, there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's a healthy community. But there's no stronger foundation, or there's nothing that's going to tie you to somebody else as strongly as a shared faith. And when you have that shared moral compass, and you're spending time together on a regular basis, and you're living your life by those morals, you will experience benefits. And whether those benefits are just a direct result of embedded human nature, meaning you're extending kindness and so kindness is coming back at you, whether that is just human nature and how we've evolved to be, or whether that's the hand of God coming down and saying, you've shown a lot of faith and this is your time of need, and this is when I'm going to extend out my hand and I'm going to help you. From my point of view, it kind of doesn't matter, because you're out there and you're contributing a net positive to the world, and you're living your life by a code of morals and a code of ethics that lends itself well to cooperation amongst humans. I think that the benefits are abundant. I did grow up in a religion and I did experience some of the things that you're talking about. And so for me, when somebody shares their experiences like you just did, the relevant part of that to me is, oh, look, here's somebody that has a really great set of principles and, like I said, ethics and morals, and they're living their life by that. And now they're sharing stories of how that benefited them. And again, whether that's just human behavior or if it's the hand of God, it's very uplifting. I think where there comes a struggle is that one aspect of human nature and the way we think is that we kind of need to experience things for ourselves. So I think there's a lot of value in what you just shared. And part of the value is what I just explained, where I see a good person doing good things and having good things done upon them. But I also know the flip side is that in order to really believe what you're saying, a person needs to experience it themselves. And this goes for anything in life, right? This is like when you have teenagers and you're trying to raise them right and you're trying to instill certain principles into them and they're resisting every step of the way and they've got to go out and make their own mistakes. And it's torture as a parent, but this is thousands of years of human behavior. We are still at our core the same as our great, 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 great grandparents, and we're still exhibiting the same human traits. So I think it's very valuable to share what I would describe, what you're describing to me is religious experiences or experiences that reaffirm your faith. But I do think that it becomes very challenging to convince somebody else that that wasn't just a nice coincidence or that wasn't human nature and behavioral based. And for me, the religion that I grew up in, part of that religion, and I'm sure you've heard of this, is Jehovah's Witnesses will go like door to door and talk to people about their religion. And you can go to the door and you can share a moving religious experience with someone, but they didn't experience it and they're going to have incredibly high levels of doubt. And that generally isn't the way into someone's heart in terms of religion. It does come down usually to that person's life experiences. So maybe they experience something really, truly traumatic. And for the first time in their life, they decide, you know what, I have nowhere else to turn. I'm going to give religion a go. Or they just have high levels of curiosity. And so they start investing time in reading scriptural text, right? The Bible or the Quran, the Book of Mormon, whatever it is, right? It's not nice to laugh, but I was going to say Scientology. Um,
Oh
I
yeah, I
mean, that
heard
is
of that.
religion. I would say barely, and there's another word I think that might be more appropriate for that. But people would also, and the word I'm thinking of is cult. But people ascribe that word to loads of religions. Some people think all religions are cults, and they have high, high, high levels of skepticism. So trying to make this a conversation between you and I'm curious as to how important is it to you that other people share your faith or that like on a day-to-day basis, how much of your faith are you sharing with others or is it more for you and your family?
This is really good. I actually love talking about this part. I mentioned the young guys at the church. What I tell them is exactly what you said. I tell them, I don't expect you all to praise and worship like I praise and worship. And I don't know what your story is. And I said, I only just got to this point last year because I put God in circumstances to come through and seen him come through for me specifically. So that's my personal relationship with him. What I like to do though is I like to just always represent what I believe, no matter what. I'm not the type of person who's going to force anything down anybody's throat because I'm against that. I actually think people will rebel more against you for doing it, and I don't think that's why God has me here is to try to tell everybody be a Christian, be a Christian. I mean, I don't. I think it's more He wants me here to show him that there is love in the world, that people care, that people are actually able to be good people, because we have a world now where being a good guy has been villainized. it's not cool to be a good person. It's not cool to be a loving, supportive husband, father. That's not cool. And when I was younger, I remember reading books like Revelations and all these books that talked about the end of days. That was part of it, is that the world would basically become more worldly. And I think I don't even have the text in front of me right now, but it was I was reading it when the hurricane hit recently, and a lot of that stuff was word for word. Um, it was talking about the relationship with parents and their children, the boastfulness of people, the lack of love, families falling apart, and even more things where it was really like, wow, this is exactly what the world is coming to now. Even me, I mean, when I was a kid, there's certain stuff that wouldn't dare be put on television. Now it's just they have it as advertisements,
Yeah, of
certain stuff.
course.
I've seen that happen right in front of my eyes. So I love people, and that's all I can do, man. I treat everybody with love. I have one of my mentors. He's non-religious. He says I think he's spiritual. I've had people who are atheists. I have my stepfather, as I mentioned, he's Muslim. To me, that's what God wanted us to do. There was a verse, I can't remember exactly the name of it. I'm not good at the Bible either. I'm not one of those people. I know every book of the Bible. I suck at the Bible. That's how I know it's genuine. I think that he just wants you to believe in Him, spend time with Him, and do good. What I did remember is the verse where there was a prostitute, and they wanted to stone the prostitute, and Jesus stepped in and actually saved the prostitute and told those to not cast judgment on her, cast judgment on yourself, before you cast judgment on others, basically. When that happened, it made me look at my life as, because another thing, a lot of Christians growing up were judgmental, messy, gossiping, all that stuff. And to me, that never made sense, because that's not what God represented. God represented eternal love for people. That is what I aim to represent with my family, my home. We believe in God, and we always show love whenever we can, and try to do the right thing at all times.
With what you were mentioning about things on TV, and I think that's just the very, 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 very tip of the iceberg of where things are headed. Religion, God, both of those are very, very, very important topics to me, and for a bunch of reasons. For me, selfishly, I really want to know. I want to know the big answers. I think anybody
Hmm.
with two brain cells to rub together really wants the big answers. There is, what it means for humanity and the direction that we're going in, the benefit of community, which we talked about. There's so many different directions you can go in. But to tie it a little bit back into mental health, I have my own opinion, but I'll ask you yours. In terms of where the world is heading, I'm not gonna limit it to just the United States or the West. The world as a whole. Do you see things with humanity moving in a positive direction the less religious people become and the more secular they become? I mean, I would guess what your answer is, but I'll ask you directly. Do you think that it's positive that people turn away from religion, or do you think that that's a negative?
I think it's a negative. Personally, it goes back to what you mentioned about the structure that religion has put into the world. I mean, it's giving people standards. Think about this now. You have people, and I'm trying to remain sensitive, but it pisses me off how we have all of these mass shootings and kids getting murdered, women getting murdered, and just ridiculous, man. A lot of these coaches touching the children and doing these things, that it's such a sick world. And I think a lot of it is because people are living a lawless life, a life of no true morals. Certain stuff you should never even think of doing because of your morals. And I'll say, like, we'll talk about this because I know this is a topic that's really interesting and touchy. You talk about the age of consent. That's something I hear about all the time. You have grown men dating 16-year-old girls, or 17-year-old girls, and freshly 18-year-old girls. And I think stuff like that is where you start to get into that. Okay, you should have morals that you stand by, even if something is legally okay. That's where, with us having no morals and these laws, the laws change all the time. weird things happen if they change the law, the age of consent to be 14 years old. Now, are you all going to start dating 14-year-old girls? So I think that's where religion has been helpful. Is the laws are the laws, but I have my own set of laws that I abide by, that I live by. Without that, you just be out here living a life with no restriction, no boundaries, and we're doomed to fail if we live like that.
So for me, and I agree with you, it's always complicated every time it's my turn to speak because I don't even know exactly where I'm coming from in terms of my belief system. For argument's sake, let's say that I'm somebody that doesn't believe in God and doesn't believe in religion. Now, my belief doesn't change whether or not it's true, right? My belief, whether I believe there's a God or not, if there is one, that doesn't make him not exist. Let's say, for argument's sake, I don't believe, and I'm just looking at this through data. It is very clear to me that humans will create God where there is none. And so if in your life you don't have religion, or I like, your friend said that they were spiritual. That's something I'm nomadic. I'm in a lot of different countries, and a lot of nomads would definitely refer to themselves as spiritual and not religious, and also not necessarily ascribe to one particular type of a God. When there's a hole, when you're not spiritual, when you're not religious, when you don't believe in God, and again, this has nothing to do with whether or not God is real, you will create your own God. That God might be money. That God, in the age of TikTok, right? That God is definitely fame. That God could be sex. There's a whole list of things that God can be, and almost none of them, and I can't even think of a positive one right now, but I'm not going to say all without taking some time to think about it. But they are not gods that are going to take you to a place of happiness. And it's very strange for me to argue for religion and for God when I'm so on the fence with all of this. But the reason being is that I've spent the last 10 years of my life really trying to make a positive dent in the world of mental health and trying to help people find the right treatment paths. And I see mental health declining in such a severe way. And this isn't necessarily a direct line from terrible mental health and not believing in God, but the idea that you have terrible mental health and you are spending your life prioritizing all of the things that are the most damaging things that we've created as humans since the beginning of time. Things like social media, things like sex websites, right? There's sex apps,
Mm-hmm.
hookup apps. That's a better way to phrase it, right? There's gambling. There's so many things that we can do with our time that not only are huge wastes of time, they're terrible for our own sanity, our own mental health. They don't contribute anything to society as a whole. And they tend to just tear things down instead of building things up. And so that's, if I get outside of myself and stop worrying about my own mortality and what death is and is there a God, and I just look at it from a humanistic point of view, you see the net negative of less faith in the world. That's a tough argument to make. Am I arguing that, well, even if you don't believe in God, you should join a religion? That's not what I'm suggesting. But clearly, the tenets of many religions, and definitely Christianity, and we'll put aside the things that people know have been done in the name of Christianity that are terrible. We all know about the wars that have taken place. We all know about abuse of children that has taken place. None of those things are evidence for or against God. Those are just bad things that have happened. If we just take a look at the teachings and the suggested pathways of living your life and interacting with other people, it's very clear to me that these are good things. And it's very clear to me that the more we move away from them, the worse everybody's doing. And I want this podcast to, eventually become some sort of beacon of light in terms of, wow, I don't feel great about myself. I've gone and seen a therapist and that hasn't worked. I guess I give up. Or I've taken some drugs and they haven't worked. Well, you haven't left no stone unturned. There's other places you can look. And again, maybe it's not that you all of a sudden become Catholic tomorrow, but maybe you start entertaining the idea of being a more spiritual being, or believing that there's more to life than just our own selfish existence. And so for me, that's why I was interested and excited about talking about this topic, because I do see people suffering. And even if it's not directly a belief in God or a belief in a religion, it's abandoning the idea of treating your neighbor like you would treat yourself, and not robbing people, and casting aside greed, and those sorts of things that really contribute to not only your happiness, but the happiness of people around you.
Oh man, that's such a powerful take. It's such a touchy subject. It defines people's purpose in life. If you have or don't have one, it changes what your purpose is. I think a lot of times.
It's just the idea of faith is very interesting to me. So I haven't talked too much about it, but one of the lessons I guess you were given as a Jehovah's Witness is the idea that humans are fallible, humans are imperfect, people make mistakes. It doesn't matter what your position is within the religion or within the church. We're all susceptible to the same temptations. We're all susceptible to sin. And faith is something that's between you and the higher power that you believe in. That's what that
Mm.
faith is. And a lot of people will hear this and only focus on what they have seen done in the name of religion. And they will judge a religion or a belief in a higher power based on the actions of imperfect people. What I'm getting to is, I remember being nomadic. I was living in Latin America, which is actually, I'm in Mexico City right now, but years ago, I was living in Colombia, Medellin, Colombia. Great place. Absolutely loved it. But I was in Latin America for a very, very long time. And when I finally shifted out of Latin America, the first place I went to was Thailand. And Latin America, most of Latin America is very, very, very Christian. And the way their belief works and the way their religions function, it's uh, I don't know if I want, I don't know if I want to be offensive. They have a deep. They really do believe in Jesus. They really do believe in God. A lot of the times, and I'm casting a broad net here, a wide net, but they're very religious in the sense that they go to church a lot. They pray a lot. They have little cards with the saints on them and the rosary. They're very religious in that way. But I do see, in terms of lifestyle, it doesn't always match up. They do like to party, and party means more than just, hang out and listen to music. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Latin America. So I was around that for a long time. And so when I switched over to Thailand, where Buddhism is the main religion practice there, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Like, I was, and I was I still do dabble in it, but I was a DJ for a long time. So I was in that scene and in that environment as well. And I got to Asia, and there's like weight lifted off my shoulders, and I could feel the peacefulness of the religion kind of sewn through the fabric of the country. And it was really nice. And it made me start looking into Buddhism and their specific version of it, mostly out of curiosity. I wasn't looking for a new religion, but I was really interested in the teachings. And I dug into them in the past, but not at the level, I did when I moved over there for a while. Long story short, I found out that amongst married people in Thailand, infidelity numbers are really, really high. And I
Mm.
was shocked. I think I was there quite a while before somebody opened my eyes to this. I hadn't even seen it, because Thai people tend to be pretty private. So it wasn't something that I had witnessed, but Thai people over time, throughout, through different conversations, clued me into this fact. Then I was able to dig a little bit and see, is there some data to back this up? And I was like, wow, they've got this really deep rooted faith. You can feel it throughout the whole country. Like you go out to eat or you go for whatever it is you're doing, you can feel the calm and the peace that is imbued through the religion. And yet these people are just people and they make mistakes and they cheat on their spouses. And then there's probably some type of penance that they do. And if you're trying to find a religion and a belief system, or you're looking for God and you expect God's people to be perfect, well, that doesn't line up with any teaching that's out there. But I think a lot of people see the things that are done in the name of religion that they don't like, or they see religious people being hypocritical or committing sins against the tenets of their own chosen religion. And they think, well, clearly God isn't with those people.
Yeah.
And it's about your own personal relationship. Do you believe in a higher power and do you want to connect to that? And
Yes.
that's really what it comes down to. And I think on the whole, generally speaking, that people that are spiritual, people that are seeking a relationship with a higher power for themselves, this isn't to grandstand. This isn't the people that get up on soapboxes and you could judge, I guess, the Jehovah's Witnesses going from door to door. I do think that they mean well, but the idea of trying to appear holier than thou, Bible thumpers, there's all different expressions you can use, right? That is a turnoff, and that is not going to draw people into religion. It kind of has the opposite effect. I was thinking, I don't know why, but like Alcoholics Anonymous just popped into my head. That's not a religion. They don't ascribe to one specific deity, although I think it is rooted in Christianity. But the idea is that they are letting go to a higher power, and that is giving them the strength to overcome their addictions. Whether that's, again, like what you were saying with your own personal experiences, those lovely experiences that you shared earlier, whether that's the hand of God coming down and helping somebody with an addiction, or whether that's just somebody choosing a good path and a path that's going to help them battle human behavior and things that maybe there was trauma in their life and that trauma got implanted upon them and helped develop them into somebody that has unfortunate proclivities that are self-destructive and harmful. Again, it doesn't matter. And as somebody that feels kind of lost out in the universe, you'll never hear me badmouth Jehovah's Witnesses. I have friends that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses they'll badmouth them all day long. I never will, because there are parts of those teachings, and there is the idea of just trying to be a good person, a good neighbor, a good partner, a good family member, a good spouse, whatever it is, that has gotten me very far in life and has taken me to some really wonderful places and has allowed me to make friends and build relationships with people because of who I'm choosing to be. And a lot of who I'm choosing to be is wrapped up in growing up and having a faith.
I honestly, I was listening to you and didn't know where to comment because
Well, see, that's the problem with the podcast, right? You don't know when I'm going to
yeah,
stop talking.
yeah. I did want to say though what you mentioned about seeing the individuals who they are committed to different faiths and then they still go out and sin, and how that can deter people away from faith. That's so prevalent now, especially with the different pastors that are large pastors on television and they have these big homes and different things, these different things that they don't make them seem of God. And me attending Elevation Church, even though I'm remote, anytime I go online, I see bad things about our pastor and his different ways. But it's like I tell anybody who I've ever connected with, no matter who the pastor is up there, what I have, my relationship with God is a completely separate thing. Because at the end of the day, that's a human just like I'm a human. And they might have more responsibility as far as being the shepherd to lead different sheep and keep them connected and provide the word. But we all still have that responsibility to build that individual relationship, like you said. And I also have to tell people, because a lot of young folks they're scared to even commit, I would say, to following a certain religion because they have that fear. They have that fear that they're going to mess up. It's like I tell them, dude, I mess up every day in different ways. God, there are a lot of things He doesn't want you to do. One of the biggest things I have is my temper. I'm a little bit of a hothead at times, especially if I don't get rest or I'm hungry, or people just aren't understanding things. I can be a hothead, or things aren't done to a standard that I like, which is my OCPD there. But I know that I have my different tendencies, and I think being authentic about it and telling them I know I have my issues, but my relationship with God is not based off my perfectionism. It's based off of my faith and my appreciation for the life that I'm able to live, the people I'm able to contact and touch, and different things. Even bringing you into my life, man. Like, people don't understand. To me, favor was the word that I had last year. Every year in my church, we agree on a word that we want God to move in our life, and then we get it
Yeah.
prayed over. And last year, my word was favor. My word was favor for the year, and my local pastor, actually picked that out personally, and I didn't really know why, but it worked in so many ways, man. Just different opportunities, networking, being able to connect with people, which is huge. Being able to move into leadership in different areas of opportunity, even in my job, being given opportunities that I hadn't ever been able to get. Favor moved all through, and meeting with you was one of those big moments because I was new. You were the first person you were the only person, I'll be honest. You're the only person I saw in my therapist who welcomed me with open arms, understanding, and authenticity. Because, at the end of the day, I have OCPD. I'm not a person who's here to just make a book and whatever run away and do something like that. Like, I actually deal with this. It's just that I love to help people and I love to teach people as well. So it went hand to hand for me to work with people after talking with my therapist. That's what she recommended. So the way you were when we connected, that's why I still try to stay connected with you always because you don't know how much that meant for me. That meant a lot for me. Imposter syndrome, you know how we are with that. That's something
Yeah,
I've
of course. Of course.
I've dealt with that so much in life. Canceled so many projects, not taking opportunities I probably should have. And when I started just believing more and doing different things to help people out, serving different things, serving in different ways. My brain is shutting off, y'all. My Adderall is wearing off. But when I started just doing different things in my life, I started to notice that the imposter syndrome started to fade away a little bit because I started putting so much pressure on myself. I put way too much pressure on myself. One of the greatest benefits I've had since joining that tribe, joining that community is
Right.
people get to see me. They get to see me, but then I also get to see the impact directly. And when I see somebody smile, I had somebody who ran out the church, man, recently. It was a young. All these stories are death, and I never realized how heavy it was. The young lady, she was her first time coming, so I was talking to her and her friend. I thought it was her boyfriend, but it was her friend. And she told me it was her first time, and I asked what brought her here. She said lost, and I was like, "Do you care to share?" And she told me, and she just lost her boyfriend. It was a boyfriend of 7 years. She just lost him a couple of days ago, like last week, to death.
Wow. Yeah.
And she went in. I think she it's possible she might have been on the spectrum. I'm assuming, just because of the choppiness of the conversation. But
Sure.
it also could have just been because just went through something traumatic. So you never know. But yeah, I saw her. I was putting everything up from the parking lot, cleaning up, and then I saw her almost running. Like she was walking, but you could tell people like trying to walk and not be interacted with by people. And I went up to her and I said, is everything okay? She was like, no, no, everything's not okay. And I asked her what was going on. She said it was too much. People were too happy, and she had to move her seat a couple times. It was just overwhelming. And in a moment like this is where I don't care about the pastor in this moment. That's not.
Hmm.
He's not on my mind. The sin that I might have committed in the morning is not on my mind. What's on my mind right now is okay. We have somebody who she's here for a reason. She was here to get something out of it. How do we help her get what she wanted to get out of this? And that's when I call over one of my local pastors who I have a great relationship with, and I explained the situation to him and said, "I need you to come help her out because she went in and she needs this, and it was an overwhelming experience. So what can we do to accommodate her?" And he was able to go talk. Man, she went back in after the service. She was so committed. She decided to become a member of the church. And she pointed me out and said I was the reason she stayed, which was heartwarming for me. And my pastor had me pray over all of us. And it's moments like that where that's why I go every Sunday. You never know
Yeah.
who you might run
Yeah.
into.
That ties today's conversation back to the previous one we had on the episode we did about procrastination. And kind of what prompted this discussion was we ended up diving into the importance of community, and especially for people with OCPD, it can be really difficult to make friends. And if you're listening to this and you know somebody with OCPD, this isn't a woe is me. Okay, we understand that many of us, not all, but many of us with OCPD can be very, very difficult. So we understand that. But the value of having community when a lot of us with OCPD can go through life pretty lonely. Again, a lot of that is on us, right? We can be very prickly at times, or for some of us, we're prickly all the time. It can be extra tricky to find that community. And so in the last conversation we had, you were talking about the importance of that community for you, in part because of the isolating aspects of having OCPD. I want to make sure that we can wrap this conversation up. There's absolutely no way you can put a bow on religion. I think this is going to be part one of, who knows, a 10 part, a 20 part. I don't know if we'll dive back into religion in our next conversation. We might pick another topic, but absolutely, I think, religion is something that you are a religious person. I'm somebody that is maybe on the fence, but has had a considerable chunk of his life spent as a part of a certain religion, and definitely with a strong faith at some points. Again, I don't have a religion that I belong to. I don't know really deep down, is it 51-49? Like, am I 51 God, or am I 51, atheist, agnostic? So I'm not here to proselytize. I'm nobody, and I'm in no position to tell anybody whether or not they should believe in God, whether they should join religion. But where I think this ties into the topic of mental health and the genesis, no pun intended, of Morning Drugs podcast, the idea is that I want to discuss treatment options. And although in my current state, religion is not a quote unquote treatment that I am using, it is not a treatment that is working for me. It might work for you. If you're listening right now and you've explored a lot of different avenues to try and improve your situation in life and improve your mental health specifically, maybe at least investigating the spiritual side of yourself. Maybe that is a part that is missing. Maybe that is something that a belief in a higher power might give you some peace of mind on some level. And you're welcome to push people because you are religious, but this isn't a push on my part. But what it is to say is that traditional means of treating mental health disorders and challenges, the whole spectrum of what's out there, right? It doesn't work for everybody. Therapy is fantastic, but it doesn't work 100% of the time. In fact, we'll dig into this in another episode. It doesn't, I don't even think it works 50% of the time. Depends on what data you look at, right? My anecdotal experience in working 10 years in and around the mental health industry, it clearly does not work for everybody. So maybe you pursue a meditation practice, or maybe you get really involved in sports. Like, there's so many different pathways you can go down, but religion is a legitimate pathway. It isn't something to be mocked, and people that practice religion are not to be mocked. We are all trying to get through this experiment called life. And I think that if you're listening to this and you're listening to Shannon and the things that he's saying are moving you in that direction, at least explore it. No harm comes from reading books. You can read the Bible, you can read other scriptural texts, you can go visit a church. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witnesses, every week there would be just a random person sitting in that we didn't know, that had just kind of wandered in and was checking it out to see if it was for them or not. And I'm not insinuating that they had poor mental health, but there's all sorts of reasons to check out religion. So I don't know if there was anything else that you'd like to add, but I did want to bring it home, at least for today, and explain why, you and I are talking about religion, and what the hell does it have to do with mental health? It might be the right treatment for you. And I think it's worth being open to that.
I'm a strong proponent of you getting around the right folks, because you can find, even if you decide to try and say, okay, I'll give this religion a try or another try if you're coming back to it, and you go to an environment that's not conducive to what you actually need, I think you might do more harm than good for yourself. So what I would recommend is this. If you are somebody who might be interested, even if it's not Christianity, and you just want to have somebody that you can build communion with or talk to, you can actually email me directly. I don't mind at all. I love talking to people. It might take me a little minute sometimes, but I love talking to people. And I'm not giving you the coaching plug. I'll give you my direct email. That is reach REACH Shannon SHANNON Williams WILLIAMS at gmail.com. And like I said, if you just need somebody to talk to, I'm there. So that's all I want to
Yeah, I think that's very, very generous of you. You're going to be inundated with spam now, but
add.
well, no, that's presuming people are listening to this. We got to get an audience first. But I appreciate you doing that for the people in the audience that are looking for someone to talk to. Once the podcast is rocking and rolling, we will have both of our contact information, different ways that you can reach out to us. Right now, there is an X account, but it's early days for everything. So, let us get rolling a little bit. And I shouldn't even say that. Shannon just gave out his email. So everybody just email Shannon. That's what you got to do.
There you
But
go.
I'll just finish with this last point, which is if you're looking, and I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, probably not, but if you're looking for a bit of a shortcut or a hack into spirituality, another thing to consider is definitely psychedelics. I mentioned this in what will end up being the first episode, but part of the motivation for putting this podcast together was a psilocybin experience that I had. I specifically went to an incredible retreat. There were doctors and nurses and all of these different support staff. It was a very legit thing. Not that it has to be. Whatever way you want to engage with psychedelics, that's none of my business. But it was a very spiritual experience for me. Now, I probably ended up more confused than I went in. Everybody that did it had a completely unique experience, but it was a religious experience. No matter what I saw and how it went, and I'm going to be getting into this in a future episode in detail and maybe future episodes, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity for healing in the world of psychedelics. From what I've investigated, a very non-traditional sort of psychedelic experience that I had in some ways, but there was strong religious components to it. And so for me, it didn't give me a newfound belief in God, but it got me thinking. And for other people that were part of the experience, it did get some people curious and it did get some people interested in at least looking deeper. So it's an odd thing to suggest. I'm kind of being nomadic. I'm around a lot of people that dabble in this sort of thing. And most people that I am aware of that have, again, dabbled in psychedelics, and there's a bunch out there, most of those people end up turning to maybe not necessarily religion, but some form of spirituality and finding it to become a very critical piece of who they are or who they're trying to become. That's totally a future episode thing. And I do really want to dig into the spiritual component of that psychedelic experience in a future episode. And hopefully, that conversation will be between Shannon and I. But all that said, yay religion or yay God, depending on, depending on where you're coming from. Again, I see a lot more good in the world from it than bad, and I'm not an overly optimistic person, so that's a lot coming from me. Yeah, was there anything you wanted to finish off with, or should we wrap up the conversation?
No, man, I love this conversation. Thanks for being so open and giving the platform to talk about it. I know it's a little touchy for a lot of different platforms and conversations in general.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Okay, well, thank you everybody for tuning in. If you were kind enough to stick with us to the very end, we appreciate your joining us. And I don't know what the next topic's going to be, but it'll be in and around mental health as always. Thank you, Shannon, for being with me today. I know I'm not supposed to apologize, but apologies if there's sound issues or whatever. We're getting our feet wet. This is new for both of us. We both got a little bit of experience in YouTube. Podcasting world's new. We'll get there. We'll figure it out. The topic's more important than the quality, not the quality of the topic, but the quality of the recording. So small apology if there's any discomfort in the audio, but we will get there. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in the next episode.